Hi, I'm Anne. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a mid-month wrap-up where I'm going to be wrapping up the books that I've read so far in April. So far, I have only read 6 adult books. However, I did finish all the books I'm reading for the Picture This Readathon, so I'll be talking a little bit about those. I would devote like a full section to that, so if you're not interested in that, you can just skip over that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the books that I am currently reading. This week is super busy for me. Actually, these next few weeks will be super busy for me because this weekend is Easter, which is really big in the Catholic Church, so there's a lot going on with that. And then it's also my husband's birthday this week. And then next week, I have finals in one of my classes. I have a big paper due. And then the week after that, I have another big paper due in my other class. So yeah, there's a lot going on these next few weeks. But after that, I'm hoping to just sit down and just tackle a lot of the more difficult books that I have been avoiding. But I am happy with how many books I got done this month. So I think we're going to actually start off with all the books that I read for Picture This and just talk a little bit about them. It would have been really easy for me to literally just read these all in one day, but I tried to spread them out and read one maybe every couple days or something like that, and I still already finished them all in the first half of the month. So, but that's fine. That's fine. That just means I have more time for other books the other half of the month. So the first one is Annie and the Wild Animals. Basically, this follows this little girl in more of a Norwegian type setting. She has this cat that she absolutely loves, and the cat leaves. She doesn't know where it is, and Annie is very lonely, so she decides to put muffins by the forest to hope to get more friends. And so all of these animals end up coming because they're like, ooh, free food. She's like, none of these will make good pets. And then the story ends with one day her cat returns, but her cat had 3 little kittens. And so that's how the story ends. It's very cute, you can see. But what I loved about it is throughout the story, you see little snippets of where the cat is. So you see her calling for her cat, then you see the cat is doing this stuff. And so you're kind of following the cat story while you're following her story. So it's beautiful art. It's a beautiful book. One of my childhood favorites. All right, the next one is How to Be Friends with a Ghost. It's less of a story and more of a how-to guide. And it just gives the best advice. It's like, ghosts love to be sung to. Instead of words, try singing to them in eerie hums and wails. It's just so great. And then in the end, it's quite bittersweet. Spoilers. It ends with, you will get old, but your ghost never will. It will still want to collect leaves, acorns, and worms. And then in the end, the best part about making friends with a ghost is that you will have the sweetest friend forever. So basically, in the end of the book, you see the little girl in the beginning with her red ribbon. She is now dead with the ghost. So it's a bittersweet ending, but gosh, this was such a cute, amazing storybook. Next one is Visit to the Aquarium, which is exactly what it sounds like. This big brother with the little brother and the little sister go to visit the aquarium, and that's what the entire book is about. It's just supposed to be an appreciation for nature and for the sea, basically. It's very cool. Not more depth to the story. I will say I remember enjoying it more as a child. And there's certain books that just don't have that much depth, but certain books still do have depth even when you read them as an adult. That is, I think, the main takeaway I had in doing this challenge is there are some kids' books that are just fun and light and enjoyable. But there are some kids' books that are truly meaningful and impactful, even if you are, in your 20s like I am reading them or older. All right, the next one is The House on Dirty 3rd Street. This is about this girl. We don't learn why her and her mother moved, but they move into this really ratty, tumbled down house, and the little girl is miserable living in this house. And the whole point is that you're not supposed to judge a neighborhood because they start having neighbors come over and help them do things, help them fix things. And in the end, the house is lovely and they have so many friends from the neighborhood. The next one, this one I didn't like as much. It's the story of the fish and the snail, and basically it's about the snail is in this little water container and the fish will come and tell him stories, and the snail loves it. And one day the fish is like, I think I'm gonna just go out on my own and not come back. And the snail, it misses him, so he decides to climb out of the container. So the snail jumps into the sea book, and that's how the story ends. Like, and I guess it's saying, you know, don't always be cautious. Try to, in your life, you will have to take chances to get anything back. And I realize that, so yeah. But there wasn't that much depth to the story, so I don't know. It was okay, but not great. Next one I read is Little Sister and Big Sister. Basically, this is about a big sister and a little sister, and the big sister is always there for the little sister when she's crying or when she's hungry, or to make sure she doesn't get run over by a car or something like that. And then one day the little sister is just fed up with the big sister telling her what to do, so she runs away. And then she sees the big sister like sit down and cry, realizing she's lost her little sister, and the little sister realizes the big sister has no one to wipe her tears or make sure she's okay. So then the little sister gets up and wipes her tears. It's a beautiful story of friendship and sisterhood, and my sister was like that a lot with me, where she would do so much for me when I was younger, and I didn't really appreciate it at the time, I don't think. So yeah, a very sweet book. All right, the next one is The Library Book. Again, I had mixed feelings about this. I loved the art. It basically follows this little girl who her dad is tired from work, so he can't play with her. So she decides to go to the library and find a library book. And so she goes to the library and it starts coming alive. So the first book she finds is Winnie the Pooh. And then she has all these different story characters who try to talk to her. You know, you have Pinocchio. Then at the end, it's just absolute chaos of all these characters, but it's an absolutely beautiful story. However, I will say I wasn't a huge fan of the words. Like, I love the art, I love the overarching story, but it just felt weird because it felt like the story was trying to be a song, like repeating certain phrases, or like a poem, but it wasn't good. And as a regular story, it didn't really work to be repeating those words, so it just sounded awkward. For example, it started off rhyming: Saturday morning and rain is pouring. Dad worked late last night. He's in there snoring. Same old stuff on TV. Boring. So it's like that, and then they repeat check it in, check it out for the library book, but I don't know. I love the art, I love the overarching story, I just didn't like the words. All right, and the final one is Ocean by Sea. This one I read last and is probably my favorite one that I hadn't read before. It follows this little boy whose grandfather just passed away, and he decides, in memory of his grandfather, to build a boat. And he builds this like rickety old boat, and then he goes to sleep, and they say he wakes up. Of course, we know he's dreaming. And he goes on an adventure in the boat to find where the ocean meets the sky, which is this place that his grandfather told him about. And so he meets this great golden fish, and he goes through the ocean, meeting all these people, until he meets the place where the ocean meets the sky. And of course, his boat just flies away. Oh no, it's like, that's the famous picture in the actual front, where there's all these boats and whales and things just floating in the sky, and then he's woken up by his mother, and that's how it ends. It's cute and sweet, and even though there's not necessarily that much meaning. All right, now that we have the kids' books for Picture This Readathon done, which I really enjoyed that readathon, let's get to the adult books. So the first one I read this month is Where You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. I read this for my book club, and this is the first book I read for my book club I can say that I truly adored. It's quite strange. So it's told in this weird part diary, part transcript form, messages, emails between different characters. So you're following a lot of characters at once. So when you start the story, it is a lot to be thrown into. The plot follows this woman, Bernadette, who was this up and coming, very talented architect, and she kind of quit architecture. She had her daughter, and her daughter was very sickly, so there was a lot to do to take care of her daughter. And so but she's also a very quirky individual, so she doesn't quite fit with the very strict, weird mother dynamics in the school that her daughter goes to, where they do these events and mothers are expected to show up for certain things. The whole point of the book is that Bernadette goes missing, and you have to figure out and piece together the story as to what happened. It is completely hilarious. There's so many great, hilarious characters. The daughter tells a lot of the story. The format itself is quite unique, and it takes a little bit to get into. I would recommend trying to push through the first 100 pages because I will almost DNF this book. I think like 50 pages in, because I'm like, this is chaos. There's so many characters, there's so many perspectives, there's so much going on. I can't follow any of it. But if you stick with it to the like 100 page mark, and I just started loving it after that. So I gave it 4 stars just because the beginning is so hard to get into, but after that it's great. All right, the next book I finally finished, The History of Religions in Korea. There's not that much to say about this book. I gave it 5 stars. It is exceptional, and I will use this as a reference guide if I ever write a book set in Korea. It is great. There are different sections on each religion, so, you know, it's not necessarily in chronological order because it would tackle, say, Buddhism, and it will go from the origins of Buddhism in Korea all the way up to the modern day. Then we'll go back and we'll do, you know, Christianity. And they had several different sections of Christianity because there's like 3 or 4 big Christian faiths in Korea. Really interesting book. The writing was just brilliant. It is quite dense and hard to get through, which is why it took me like 3 months. The next one I finished is A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I actually talked about this in my 100 favorite classics, and this book was amazing. It tells of the day in the life of a prisoner at a Gulag war camp, the Soviet Union prisoner war camps. They're not war camps, they're just camps. They're just prisoner camps in Siberia, and it's brutal book, but this one is far more hilarious than the Gulag Archipelago. It's just like a light, fun read. It's only 150 pages, so yeah, I was able to read that relatively quick. The next one is A Forgery of Roses by Jessica S. Olsen. This book was intriguing. It came out last month, I think, which is why I picked it up. It follows this young woman, Myra, who has this talent in this world where she can paint and change the painting to change the person. So it's kind of a little bit like a opposite Dorian Gray. In Dorian Gray, you have the picture painted and then the picture grows older and then Dorian Gray stays young. In this one, it is more like, let's say, for example, she has a scar on her hand. She paints a portrait of herself and then she paints that scar away. That scar will now not be on her arm, so she can essentially heal herself. The same thing would go if, you know, someone broke an ankle. She could then paint that their ankle was fixed, and then it would be fixed in real life. So that is her ability. It was a really unique way of doing magic. So she is discovered to have this power in this world, and in this world, it's people like her, prodigies they are called, aren't liked. They're often imprisoned, they're ostracized, they're not a good thing to be. So she's hidden that she has this ability. And now this powerful governor's wife finds out that she has this ability, and she's like, okay, my son just died this morning, so I want you to bring him back to life. And Myra has no idea if she can do that. So the problem is she gets to the house because she's blackmailed to do this. And she realizes, well, I can't heal him, bring him back to life until I know what actually killed him. The problem is she finds out that he didn't accidentally fall from a balcony. He was terrified of heights. He was possibly pushed or possibly stabbed before he even fell, which means it's a murder mystery. So she meets his older brother, who is much more introverted than he was. He wasn't in the political eye like his brother was. And together they kind of solve the case. There's some twists. The first, I'd say, half or third of the book, I really enjoyed. It presented this magic system, but then it kind of pushed that aside for being a focus on the murder mystery. So it turned into very much like a typical murder mystery, which was fine. Like, I was enjoying it, even though I was like, well, it doesn't really fit with like fantasy that much. But then the next like half of it, it got a little bit teen angsty. There were some like random twists that I was like, okay. The twist at the end was quite good. The twist of who the murderer was and the solution of the crime was very interesting. Another thing I disliked is that I could never place what exactly was the world. In one sense, they had things like telephones. They had like proper medical facilities. But then they also talked about like women would wear dresses and how societally it felt very much like the Victorian era, or like pre-Victorian era. So it was a very strange world where I wasn't sure if it was like more modern or more like fantasy, historical. So I could never place the world, and because of that, I never connected that much to the world and the magic system within the world that much, because it just felt so underdeveloped. So it wasn't a bad book, but it also wasn't great. All right, the next one I read was Wild Irish Rose, which is the 18th book in the Molly Murphy series by Rhys Bowen. I talked about really enjoying Rhys Bowen, and I was like, you know what? I haven't kept up with the Molly Murphy series. I should see if there's a new book released in that. And there was, so I read it. And this one was actually co-written with Rhys Bowen's daughter, which is really interesting. And this one is the first one that I didn't like. This one had too much like angst, and the mystery. The problem with a murder mystery is if you are in front ahead of the detective, it can be really frustrating to read a murder mystery where you're like, I know that is the murderer. It's clear, it's obvious. Even a person who doesn't read many mystery novels will know that something's up. And yet your detective doesn't know and is oblivious to it. So I was really frustrated by that because I knew who the murderer was less than halfway through. And it wasn't like, I surmised like, oh, maybe this is it. I mean, I just have like an inkling. No, this was like, yeah, they're obviously it. They're like the main suspect. There's no way anyone else is it. And it was. So I don't know. That was disappointing. So I gave it like 3 stars. I gave Forgery of Roses also 3 stars. I should have mentioned that earlier. So it wasn't a bad book, but it wasn't great. So the last book I read so far this month is His Majesty's Opponent, Subhash Chandra Bose, and India's Struggle Against an Empire by Sugata Bose. So Sugata Bose was the great nephew of Bose, I believe. In India during the independence movement through World War II, he was much more violent. He actually joined the Japanese, got together an army of Indian and some Japanese men, and tried to invade India. They came from Burma, I believe. He was in the independent movement, but unlike Gandhi, whose whole spiel was nonviolent resistance, his was violent resistance. This was a fascinating book. I didn't know much about Bose. I read this for my Indian in World War II class, and it was great, but it was also really dense. This book, and I know everyone else in my class really struggled with it because it is so dense, but it was interesting because I didn't know about Bose. I didn't know about the army he put together. His ideals were just so interesting because like he was fundamentally against Hitler and against Japan, but he also saw it was like the lesser of two evils to side with them as opposed to side with the British Empire who had colonized India. So he was a really fascinating man. Like, obviously I don't agree with him in joining the Japanese, but I also see that like some of his motives were good. So It's a fascinating book. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're super into Indian history, but it was interesting to read. So those are all the books that I have read so far this month. I am currently reading 3 books. The first one is an ebook, and that's Circus of the Dead by Kimberly Loth. I'm reading this for book club, and I'm hoping to finish this soon because I need to have it due by Tuesday because that's when my book club meets. This is about this girl who she goes to spend the summer with her uncle in the south in like a swamp, and she finds this like creepy circus, and then she discovers she can't leave that island swamp, and there are weird stuff. It's called like Circus of the Dead, and they only open like twice a month, I think, every 2 weeks for one night, and they do shows that are like watching someone get eaten by a tiger, and that's fun. So it's a interesting book so far. I'm currently a third of the way done. It's more of like a little bit teen angst, which I'm not that enjoying. It's like, ooh, super hot, mysterious guy. Of course there is. But then you also have this intriguing mystery of like, what is the circus? Is it like cursed? Is it magic? Are there like demons involved? Like, what's happening here? So I'm really fascinated by the book so far. So I'm enjoying that. I'm currently also about a third of the way done with In the Garden of Beasts. This follows the U.S. ambassador to Germany right before Hitler, I'm going to say invaded Poland, but it wasn't, because this family, the Dodds family, came to Germany in 1933. So it follows the rise of Hitler from the perspective of like an American family in Berlin. And I will say, I do not care for the Dodds family. They are the ambassador's family. I don't care for any of them. I don't care for the story that much. I feel like it's too disconnected to Hitler. I'm just not caring. Like, I'm interested in like the rise of power of Hitler. I just feel like this is too disconnected. But Larson is just so good at writing that I kind of like it, even if I don't like any of the family. So I don't know. He's just so good at nonfiction. He's just so good at storytelling. Like storytelling nonfiction. He can make a story that I don't really like interesting. So, you know, I'm enjoying it, but against my will. The last book I'm reading is The Clackety. This book is intriguing. I'm currently, again, 35% of the way done. Wow, I'm like the same amount done with all these 3 books. I don't have that many thoughts. It's about this girl who lives in this strange town, and her aunt goes missing, and there are like ghosts in this town and things like that, and she finds that her aunt disappeared through this slaughterhouse that has been abandoned, and the slaughterhouse used to be run by this like serial killer whose ghost is believed to haunt the area, and she is pulled into this dark world by the Clackety. It calls itself the Clackety. I think it's a horrible demon. We'll see. And it's told, oh, you have to go into these 7 houses? Yes, 7 houses. And they're all like very unique and interesting and horrific. And there's something she needs to find in each house. I'm currently only on like the 2nd house, but this book is fascinating. It is a great, creepy read. Perfect for Halloween. I should be reading this around Halloween, but I'm reading it now. So yeah, I'm loving it. And in fact, there's also quite a few like great quotes here. I'll just read you some because I'm remembering it. The thing had a voice, like shards of glass and wounded animals. I mean, what kind of great imagery is that? So yeah, I'm enjoying this book, obviously. So those are the 3 books I'm reading. I have more books that I want to get done this month. I have a lot of books to read, and I have very limited time to read them. So we'll see how much I can read. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Saturday and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.